Hello, what is going on, everybody? Last video I will be recording today because I'm starting to lose my voice. In this video, I'm going to be going over my preliminary POB for a new skill being added in 3.20, which is Volcanic Fissure and Volcanic Fissure. So don't put too much stock in this. Let me see. I don't even remember what the base numbers were for the skill, but I literally just subbed in Molten Strike, which has been pretty popular at this point. I think the base numbers are pretty similar. I have it up somewhere over here. Yeah, Volcanic Fissure is 110 to 110, and Molten Strike is 110 to 110. Oh, so it's identical basically, in terms of the attack damage and effectiveness, but it also adds like extra flat fire and stuff. So don't worry about it too much. There's going to be some fuckery here, and don't worry too much about the DPS values and stuff like that, because it's none of it is set in stone, and we're literally doing it on a different skill with a bunch of stuff. We have no idea how the skill scales or anything. Like we don't know anything. I just want to show you guys the tree and show you guys kind of like my initial thoughts with it. So yeah, let's get into it. So Volcanic Fissure is a slam that has multiple components. You slam the ground, and then it looks like tectonic slam, and then it shoots out basically a cremation Molten Strike type effect that explodes and shoots out balls that then land and explode. So there's a lot of ifs with this build. We don't know. We're going off level 1 gym info, so don't put too much stock in this. I will say that I will be making a build diary for some point in the league, even if I don't league start this. So if you're really keen to see this in action, don't worry too much. It will be done at some point. If you want to see me making these builds live, or you want to see these builds potentially in action on league start, make sure you follow my Twitch, which will be down in the description below. All right, so let's get into it. Typical generic pathing. For a Marauder, we go up typical slam pathing as well. We want to grab deep breaths, which gives us a bunch of Warcry AoE, Warcry cooldown recovery, and a mastery here for Warcries cannot exert travel skills. This is so when we leap slam, we don't lose exerts and increase damage. We path through prismatic skin, typical max res. We want more, defensive stuff. Pathing through Admonisher is another generic Warcry node. It gives us a bunch of Warcry speed and more CDR in our Warcries. We path through Master of the Arena and Art of the Gladiator, all the way down over here for Entrench, because we need to get all the spell suppression we can, as well as the mastery here for an additional 12%. Then the life mastery, and then point blank. We don't know. This is the first if we're getting to in the build. We don't know where the origin point for the projectiles is, since we have never seen a skill like this before. So we don't know if the origin point is the player. We don't know if the origin point is where the balls are spawned out of when the fissure explodes, blah, blah, blah. So sorry for the voice crack. Like I said, I'm losing my voice. This could be really good. It's really good no matter what. It's just a question of how good it is and how good it is while clearing and at range, really. Anyway, moving on from there, I've actually opted to take Marked for Death, because we are using Sniper's Mark with this build, and I'll get into the nitty gritty here, because I know people were telling me in my Discord that Quantric made a POB as well. Mine is quite different from his for a bunch of different reasons, but we'll get into that later. So these nodes here give 20% increased damage with hits against marked enemy, 10% increased effective marks, Coaling Strike against marked enemies, which is really big, and then 10% chance to gain frenzy charges when you hit your marked enemy. So this is a big one. This is how we're generating frenzy charges, especially in single target. This is a huge deal. This is a lot of single target damage. Not only is this attack speed, which isn't that important, but it's 12% more damage multi and Coaling Strike. So this is a lot. So using Sniper's Mark enables us to get Coaling Strike, 12% more damage multi, and all the base damage that Sniper's Mark gives. It's also very important to note that I'm only accounting for the damage that Sniper's Mark gives. The whole it spawns bonus projectiles, we don't know how that interacts with the skill, so I just pretended it didn't work at all, because someone in my Twitch chat said that it doesn't work with Molten Strike, so we will just assume that it doesn't work at all. If it ends up spawning additional balls, then really cool, it's more OP, but for now we're just assuming it doesn't work, and I think that's a safe assumption. So back on this side, we path down through Measured Fury, which is our last Warcry node. It gives us an additional exert on our Warcries, and we also take the Mastery for dealing 20% increased damage for each time we've cried recently. This is, for most gameplay, going to be a 40% to 60% generic damage increase all the time. It's a very strong node for 1 point. Now we path down through Golem's Blood and grab our first life mastery for 10% increased max life, and we path down to Panopticon. Now, you guys may know if you follow the channel for a long time that I wasn't a Panopticon believer at all. However, with some testing last league and like the new tech and the stuff they are changing with the totem masteries, I decided to try to lean very heavily into totems. I tried to embrace the playstyle and try to make them live as long as possible instead of constantly running away and complaining about it. Hopefully this is gone next patch, but for this patch, we'll, live with the totems and hopefully we can make this work. So why do I go Panopticon? So let me be very clear. People who anoint Panopticon on their builds are absolutely POB padding. It is absolutely POB warrior bullshit, and it is not realistic whatsoever. However, when you manually path Panopticon, there's a reason why it is good. So each one of these small nodes gives your totems 15% additional fizz reduction and 15% life. Then you get to Ironwood, gives them 30% additional life, 30% all res, and you get 150 armor per summon totem. And again, the minor node here is a 10% life. So this makes your totems much more survivable, okay? And then Panopticon itself gives your totems increased damage and gives you way more buff effect from your totems, which is why you want it, right? Now the mastery here, I just took totem placement range because it's obviously not in the game yet. But the mastery we're taking is that the effects of your totems linger for 3 seconds, which means once you're out of range of them or they die, you maintain their buff for 3 seconds. Now, this is what I'm planning around and what I'm building around heavily. So as someone in my Discord pointed out, well, Ironwood still sucks even if you're fighting Shaper. Shaper is the worst boss for melee builds, period. When it comes to totems, because there's so many degens. His Shaper beam is the size of the sun. Even if you put the totems behind him, they'll still die to the Shaper beam. So there's and then he teleports all over the place. He does the bullet hell with the balls, and your totems will die to that. You finally manage to get your totems down to deal some damage, and then he does the bullet hell phase, or he phases and he teleports you to the add phase, and it's miserable. You can never have your totems out for Shaper. So the lingering effect will help for that. But for most other bosses and single target encounters, taking Ironwood makes them have much more uptime and way less of a baby city type feel that's very frustrating. So that's why I pathed through that, and we'll get into other synergies via the Ascendancy later. Pathing down through Wrecking Ball for just a bunch of damage, grabbing the 2-hand mastery for armor and evasion rating. You could technically path through martial experience, but you do waste a little bit of stats on the overwhelm. So I decided to go for Wrecking Ball instead. Kind of the same idea with Bastion Breaker. Bastion Breaker is actually a lot of attack damage, but you do waste a little bit of stats on the overwhelm because you're not dealing fizz damage. Lava Lash is amazing. It's an amazing ability for any type of fire attack based skill. You get 12% increased damage for the small nodes, 30% for the large node for 3 points. That's a lot of damage. And then 8% Elipen, as well as getting a fire mastery. This is where we get our other 40% of fizz converted to fire, because if I recall correctly, Volcanic Fissure only has 60% conversion natively. So we're pathing up through here, and this is not a mistake. You will be taking hard knocks all the time, and I'll get into that when I get into the links and the gear section. But you do need to take this, but you don't need to take this right away. We path Champion of the Cause for aura effect and mana reservation efficiency. And then, typical Marauder duelist, crap. You path through Soul of Steel. It's max res, it's a ton of armor, it's your determination mana reservation efficiency on the mastery. Through Bloodless for life, and then Steadfast. This is how we're getting Fortify. You don't want to use Fortify on the main link, because Fortify, according to the wording, will not... I'm assuming that using Fortify support will not increase the damage of the balls, because it says melee hits deal 19% more damage, and there was some type of wording, attacks from melee hits, so that potentially there's a way there in which the balls may get the extra damage. from Fortify, but I doubt it. So I went with the Fortify Mastery instead. So you just path through here for the duration on Fortify, and then, you know, this will put you at 21 Fortify base. Pathing up, you grab Juggernaut for, you know, life. We're scaling endurance charges, and we have one jewel socket here, which is where we're getting our mana leech from, life, and then I just have reduced effective chill and shock, because why not? And then barbarism, life, mastery, plus 50 life, and then slaughter. This is for, you know, it's a bunch of damage, it's max rage, and then we take the axe mastery for rage on hit. That's where we're getting our rage gen from, and then resolute technique. Right. So that's the whole tree. What's the Ascendancy look like? So, as you do with Chieftain, we go path through Namahu, which is 50% of fizz damage converted to fire damage. I guess I saved a passive point, didn't I? I don't need that anymore. Brain fart. Like I said, preliminary POBs. These are very rough. There's not a lot of time spent on these. So, 50% of fizz converted to fire damage. And every 10 seconds, gain 100% of physical damage is extra fire damage for 4 seconds. And then Hinakora, we get a bunch of life leech for free, 10% increased strength, which is some damage and some life. And we get cover in ash on hit. This is really cool because this opens us up to not have to actually use Infernal Cry for the build. We're able to use other cries, which I'll get into. So finally, Volaco rather, regenerate 0.5% life per second per endurance charge, 15% more damage if you've lost an endurance charge in the past 8 seconds, gain 1 endurance charge every second if you use a work cry recently, and plus 1 to max endurance charges. And then we have 1 additional endurance charge we've taken here. So that puts us at 5 endurance charges total for the build. And we war cry, obviously, so we have endurance charge generation. And then we're going to be using Immortal Call, so we will be removing them for the more damage as well. Now, here's the important part. We should, for the most part, have all of our endurance charges up by the time Immortal Call wears off while mapping, because this minor node gives 5% chance to gain an endurance charge on kill. Now, when Immortal Call procs, we're not using a level 1 or anything, so it won't be proccing like crazy. But when it does proc, we have it for 2.2, a little bit over that, seconds, right? So, meaning, depending on when it procs, we will have 2 to 3 endurance charges baseline by the time Immortal Call falls off. So if we can generate 1 to 2 endurance charges in the duration of Immortal Call, then we have literally no downtime without max endurance charges. And if not, it'll be like 1 second before we hit max, so it's not a big deal. While mapping, this will be up. We'll pretty much have 100% uptime on our endurance charges even while sacrificing them. Now, while bossing, if we manage to get hit really hard and proc Immortal Call, we have that for 2.5 seconds, and then we're back at 2 to 3 endurance charges, and then the guard skill is still on cooldown anyway. So those 2 endurance charges don't really make or break bossing at all, and you shouldn't really be eating like slams to the point where you need to worry about if it's still on cooldown or not. So this should be pretty comfortable. In theory, we'll have to see how it feels in the actual game, but that's my reasoning behind it. Now, this is the big node. See, normally this is where you would go like to Salio for the free fire res, ignite resist, and then you get, you know, a bunch of life recovery for free and 20% fizz taken as fire, which is very, very strong, very good defensive node, which I will probably end up taking this node if I end up using an Echoes of Creation helmet in the build. But that would require some restructuring of the build a little bit, and I haven't made that tree yet, so I'm not worrying about it for now. But this is something I would almost certainly take for Echoes of Creation, and I would probably get rid of Volaco. So what are we taking instead? We're taking Tukahama, War's Herald. 2% of your damage dealt by your totems is leeched to his life, so this is even more leech, I guess, which is a cool thing, but not, you know, whatever. It's also worth noting that the totems in this build do a lot of damage. It's almost like 700k, I think, with all of them out, which is a lot of DPS. Normally, I think adding totem DPS to a POB is padding, especially since they're difficult to make live. They're basically impossible to have uptime on if you don't have Ironwood, which is the Panopticon node down here. They're basically impossible to make live. It's absolutely padding. But with specking into Ironwood and stuff and trying to really juice their survivability and whatnot, I think it's not really a stretch to include some of their DPS or maybe account for like 50 to 60% uptime or something and math that out and add that to the build's overall DPS. I don't think that's a stretch at all, especially because this node also gives them 100% increased activation range, which is huge. And it also gives 100% increase effect of buffs. So with this and Panopticon, we're getting 150% increase effect of buffs from our totems. So we're really going hard on the totems. And this is a cool thing. We've invested a lot into the totem survivability. They deal a ton of damage with this. And even if they die now with the new mastery, the effects will still linger. So even if we are fighting Shaper and it's miserable, which is where this tech would normally fall apart, we're still getting the buffs because with the new mastery, those effects will linger on us. So I went really hard with this, okay? I also think people are sleeping a little bit on the usefulness, and this may just be me being biased because I juiced the totem aspect so hard, but Ancestral Warchief Totem gives me a lot of overall damage for the build, right? It is a lot of overall damage because it's only a melee damage increase, so this doesn't increase the damage of the balls. But I see no reason why you wouldn't want to use it anyway, considering that it literally doubles the damage of the base hit of the slam, right? There's no reason to not use this, right? In my opinion, at least the way I've juiced it. If you haven't spec'd into, you know, Panopticon and Ironwood and the Mastery to even have that uptime and the linger to begin with, and you don't have 2 Kama, it's probably not worth using, to be honest. But for this build, it is. And we're using Blood and Sand. So the links on our main skill here are Molten Strike, Volcanic Fissure, Elemental Damage with Attacks. I am not using GMP right now. I was just testing it out. Fire Pen, Vicious Proj, Added Fire Damage, and Combustion. Now, why Combustion? It requires 111 int, which is why we need to take this node, because I don't think it's realistic to have int rolled on a bunch of pieces of gear, right? So we click that node for 1 passive point. And then I think we use our belt craft, if I remember correctly. Yeah, we use a hybrid bench craft for the other int, because we also need dex too, I think, for Sniper's Mark. So that's why we grab all the int. It's so we can use a max level combustion, because combustion is like double the damage of the next highest thing, which is inspiration and like life tap and stuff like that. So that's why I figured it's like 1 passive point and the bench craft on my belt to be able to use a support gem that does double the damage of everything else. It seems very worth it to me. So that's the links on that. Moving down, I'm using Herald of Ash, Herald of Purity, Mark on Hit, and Sniper's Mark. I'm using a max level Sniper's Mark. So what it says here at the bottom, it's 35% increased damage from projectile hits, but projectiles which hit cursed enemies split towards 4 additional targets. I'm assuming that that does not work with the skill. If it does, this is like insane damage. But I'm just assuming it doesn't. So in our gloves, we have Life Tap, Cast when Damage Taken, Immortal Call, and Leap Slam. So this is a little bit of an awkward part with the build. I'm using Leap Slam without faster attacks. It shouldn't be too much of an issue because we have quite a lot of attack speed baseline anyway. And then with Ancestral Protector out, with all the buff effects and it lingering. So here's the cool thing. Ancestral Protector with that Ascendancy node will basically, the AoE of our totems, the buff, will basically be screen wide. So we can throw that down. It'll be there for the whole screen. And then for 3 seconds afterwards, we can leap the next few screens away and it'll still be there. So if you want to while mapping, you can just throw the Ancestral Protector down once every like few screens. Like I would say like once every like 5-10 seconds or whatever, and you just get giga attack speed steroid for free, like crazy attack speed, like Rite of Ruin Berserker type attack speed for free, for just throwing it down every once in a while. So you could do that if you want. We'll have to see how it feels in play. If I need faster attacks, I'll find a way to fit it in. But it's just the hardest thing with slams is socket pressure. Slams are like melee struggles so much with socket pressure. Slams struggle next level with socket pressure. This skill struggles next level with socket pressure because it has a bunch of other stuff you have to account for that normally you wouldn't need to on a melee build because you're scaling projectiles as well. Anyway, with the setup here, I'm using a level 10 cast when damage taken with a level 12 Immortal Call. This is proccing at 1,300 damage taken. That seems like a pretty decent medium for me. I could take it down by like 1 or 2 levels and have it proc at about 1,000. We'll have to see. This is one of those things where like when I'm playing, this will change a lot based on like my current gear, my current life, how I'm feeling, blah, blah, blah. Moving on from there, this is our chest link setup. You don't need a 6 link here. A 5 link is fine. Intimidating Cry, Rallying Cry, Seismic Cry, Second Wind with Life Tap, and then Frost Blink is just there. So this is something that if you use Echoes of Creation, Ben's Slam Helmet that drops off Shaper, you can save a link in this. You can save a socket because you don't need to use Second Wind anymore because that's what his helmet does for free. The issue with that in modern day PoE is that you give up your helmet slot, so you won't be able to have spell suppression on your helmet, and you also have to give up this mastery because you can't have spell suppression on your, or you won't have evasion on the helmet, which means you don't get suppression there either, which means you're losing like 20 to 30% ish spell suppression, which makes it really, really hard to actually get spell suppression capped, if not impossible, if you're not going with like probably cluster jewels and stuff like that. I would imagine. I think it's like literally, unless you path to entrench and then also towards Mage Bane, which seems pretty that's just not point efficient, right? Anyway, but you can do that. It would just take a little bit of restructuring on the tree. Like I said, I don't have that POB ready yet. Anyway, yeah, so this is the Cry setup. So Intimidating Cry, double damage. Rallying Cry is a bunch of damage. This will only work with Herald of Purity, worth noting. And then Seismic Cry. So this is very interesting. This is where I'm going to get into the AoE debacle. Again, new skill. We have no idea how this works with the mechanics. AoE is one of the biggest question marks. We don't know if it's gonna, if it works like Old Blade Fall Blade Blast, where increasing AoE means the balls will still fall as they would anyway, but now they just have a bigger AoE. Then AoE is really, really good on this build, and Seismic Cry is actually like a damage gain. Not only is it huge quality of life because your AoE will be huge, and thus your clear will be huge, and your Herald of Ash explosions will be huge, and it'll feel great to play, but it'll be a single target buff because you'll get basically guaranteed overlaps on all of your projectiles. However, if it works like post-nerf Blade Blast and Cremation and stuff like that, stuff they've changed with projectiles in the past, then, and Seismic Trap even, then what will happen is if you increase the AoE, it will also increase the spread of the projectiles, meaning that the explosion will be bigger, but they'll also fall further away from each other, which would brick your overlaps, right? So it remains to be seen on whether they kind of had the foresight to nerf this before it came out or not. In the past, every time they've released something like this, scaling AoE is really broken with it until they go back and nerf the way it scales later. So we'll just have to see. If like I said, the projectile spread is not influenced by AoE, then Seismic Cry will be the cry you'll use. And if it isn't, then you could still use Seismic Cry for like clearing and then just not use it on single target, and it'll be a quality of life buff. Or you could swap in Enduring Cry here to make sure that you basically always have full endurance charges no matter what. You don't have to care about the regenning from the Immortal Call. So yeah, that'll be the two options you have here for the last one. Because using Infernal Cry does literally nothing for you here. It'll give you like the combustion explosions, but you don't really need that to supplement your clear because you have Herald of Ash. And because we're a Chieftain, we get cover in Ash for free, that's just like a fucking, it's a checkbox that you check rather. There's no like, you can't stack it or anything like that. So there's no reason to run Infernal Cry. And then I have Determination being ran in an unset ring. Now I have here in the notes, Anoint Instinct early game, to make capping spell suppression easy, without needing to rely on a Quartz Flask, obviously. But late game, after you get a few tier 1 suppression rolls on your gear, you can Anoint Whispers of Doom and use a Warlord Influence Ring for flammability on hit. So early game, you will Anoint Instinct, which is a dirt cheap 12% spell sup. It's Sepia Azure, right? But then late game, once you have all your spell suppression in order completely on your gear, what you can do is Anoint Whispers of Doom and use Flammability, which will be a really, really large DPS boost. Even though we're not self-casting it, we don't get that crazy buff that, you know, like the curse otherwise would get in 3.20. It will still be buffed even if you're automating it. It will still be a damage buff for you. So hey, it's, you know, it's the best anoint you could possibly get. It's a massive damage increase. So I think anointing instinct early to help cap spell suppression when you need it, and then once your character's more geared out, fleshed out, because you need to get 3 golds anyway, which doesn't take a long time to farm, but on league start, if you were to league start this, it would be like low on your priority list, right? Especially in SSF. Yeah, you'll anoint that. So that's all of that. I guess we'll go through the gear real quick. I have it pretty low here. It's a 700 PDPS axe. It's really easy to get, especially like by the time you're level 95, 96, 97, you should definitely have at least a 700 PDPS axe, especially with the new fracturing orbs that are dropping off Harby. It should be much easier to craft Fizz weapons again. So we're using, you know, just hybrid bases so we can roll spell suppression. Basically, all that matters on every single one of these pieces of gear is life and suppression, and then resist rolls where you can get them. For the Eldritch, sorry, I bit my tongue. For the Eldritch Implicits, we're running reduced mana cost of attacks and mana reservation efficiency. Our chest piece, we're running Determination Aura effect and max res. If you want, you could try to run something other than Determination here. Now, for the gloves, we're using Inflict Fire Exposure on hit and Herald of Purity buff effect. Now, before you get this, you're probably going to want to use Wave of Conviction if you need a way to apply exposure. Oh my gosh, it's so late. If for a way to apply exposure, and you can just like not use Blood and Sand or not use like something else in the meantime while you wait for that, or not use Frost Blink or something. This would be like very early game. Because arguably you won't even need the damage like for like map bosses and stuff like that, so you could just wait until you get the implicit. We'll just have to see what the actual final numbers of the slam are for how necessary it may or may not feel to use Wave of Conviction before you get that implicit, but you'll definitely want to swap to this implicit as soon as you can. And then in the boots, we're running Intimidating Cry, has increased cooldown recovery rate and 4% increased action speed. Just because Intimidating Cry is double damage, it is literally just 2 times damage. So there's nothing that's going to be better than this realistically. So having as much uptime you can on full exerts is going to be the most optimal play. In the amulet, we're running a turquoise for dex and int. I just have a amulet here with like some flat fizz to attacks, Ewa, which I'm pretty sure you can get from an essence on amulets. I may be wrong there, don't take my word for it. And then life, basically good prefixes, and then dead suffixes. I made sure to have a like non-benchcraft on it to account for the fact that I did have the prefixes kind of filled. That's the only item I have that on though. Because for the rings, I have literally life and shock, and then I have life and 1 Elrion craft with a very low roll Ewa. So 1 Elrion craft looks to be enough. If it's not enough, obviously I can put it on the turquoise amulet, and then I would be basically sacrificing probably that flat fizz. I think getting an amulet with just life and Ewa is really easy to do. So I don't think I'm being like too needy there, too greedy. And then in the belt, we have just life with Ewa again, and then benchcraft on dex int. In our jewel, we're using life with a dex int roll, but you don't need that. You can just put in whatever. Like the jewels are just so whatever. There's so many beneficial mods you can have on a jewel. Just put whatever you want in there. All the flasks are the flasks you see me typically running. A divine seething, which is instant with corrupting blood removal. A jade with all of these. The prefix is going to be charge gain on hit, reduce effective shock, reduce effective curse, increase armor, and then I have ignite removal here. But you can, instead of taking ignite removal, you could take increase evasion for your jade, just depending on what you want to do. And then the jewel, like I covered earlier, is basically just life and mana leech are the important stats there. That's what you want. So I believe that's everything I went over. Yeah, and you can absolutely fit Echoes of Creation into the build if you want, which would be gaining a lot of damage. basically, if you get a good roll, it's 15% more damage for each Warcry exerting your attacks, which is 45% more damage multi if you have all 3 exerts up, and 30% more multi if you have 2 exerts up, which is, it's going to average out. I remember I did the math for this with all the cooldown reduction. It's like 38% more damage if you've got the boot implicit and you have deep breaths taken, which you do in this build, which means you'd be averaging out to like 37.5% more damage to 38% more damage multi when accounting for the downtime of Intimidating Cry from the helmet, which is a ton of more multi to get for free. Like that's like Aspect of Carnage. I was gonna say for free, but not really, because you self-damage, which is if I were to fit that into the build, I would probably drop Volico and grab Tesalio, because we have we can get endurance charges via Inexorable using the, like, from like 6 months ago when Echoes of Creation first came out, I did a Slayer Earthquake build, slam build with the helmet, and this is how because you drop Enduring Cry in that build, and this was how I sustained endurance charges, was by using Inexorable, because the Echoes of Creation works just like Bone Shatter, where it self-hits, you're hitting yourself, so you can proc endurance charges. And then also you need all this armor gain anyway, because you are chunking the shit out of yourself with Echoes of Creation. It's basically just Bone Shatter inside of a helmet. You're like hitting yourself very hard with 2 to 3 excerpts up. So because of that, I would take the 20% Fizz taken as fire to help mitigate that. The extra life recovery rate would also help with regaining life after the hit, and then taking Inexorable for endurance charge generation instead. And then I would swap out of Immortal Call and take excuse me, and take Molten Shell, because I would need that consistent Molten Shell proc to help mitigate the damage from the helmet as much as I could. Those would be the changes I would make to fit in the helmet. And then, like I said, you would basically have to change the tree around in some way to fit in cluster jewels to get your spell suppression cap, because that's the only way you'd be able to do it, because there's no way you're pathing all the way to Mage Bane and reflexes. That's so many points. Anyway, yeah, that's the changes I would make for that, and I think that's everything with this build. Again, preliminary. It's not super optimized or anything, but it looks cool. You guys let me know. If you guys like the video, be sure to leave me a thumbs up. Make sure you subscribe. If you didn't like the video, feel free to leave me a thumbs down and tell me what you think I can do better. Again, this is just preliminary stuff. Just threw together a POB for, like, you know, potential build diaries and stuff I'll be doing in this league for YouTube content and stream content. If you liked the video and you like the content, like I said, you can subscribe to the channel. If you want to see the stuff live, I will be playing potentially this or some other build on League Start, pushing the HCSSF ladder live on my channel on Twitch, so you can follow me over there. I'll also be doing, you know, streams making builds like this leading up to the release of the league. So POB streams making my own builds and helping viewers with their builds, if you want to come check out my Twitch. And then also follow me on Twitter for dank memes and PoE related content opinions that don't really warrant a whole video. Also, I have a Discord, so make sure you join the Discord if you would like personal build help for free. I don't charge anything for any of that stuff, so you can just jump in and ask for build help, or just hang out with the bros and probably more dank memes. So that's everything. Hope you guys enjoyed the video. This is gonna be the last one for the day because I'm absolutely losing my voice. I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.